again. It's the week before spring break and everyone's just toast, so thank you for coming. And I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, but please, eat that food because I ordered for a lot more people than are here currently, so just enjoy. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much everybody for coming. I'm Irene Ngun. I'm an Associate Program Officer with the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. I'm here with Dr. Laurie Baefsky and my colleague Dr. Frazier Benya to talk about some of our work. Laurie and I will be talking about branches from the same tree, a consensus study that we did that was published last year in May. I guess a little bit about my background. As an undergraduate, I studied biochemistry and economics. I have a master's in international relations. Before joining the Academies, I was with the House Science Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, and briefly with my Congresswoman, Eddie Bernice Johnson, before I got the job at the National Academies. And so now I'm an Associate Program Officer with the Board on Higher Education, which is the board that commissioned this report. And so I'll give you a little bit of a high-level overview of our report, and then I'll quickly shift it over to Laurie and the rest of the folks on the panel. So the report is titled The Integration of Humanities and Arts with Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine in Higher Education, Branches from the Same Tree. What this committee was interested in looking at was what the research says about educational outcomes of courses at the undergraduate and graduate level that integrates arts, humanities, mutually integrates arts, humanities into STEM. And so one of our first tasks was to define what we mean by integration. And we're using that throughout the report and throughout the deliberation, we use this definition of integration, which encompasses research that looks at interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and transdisciplinary courses and programs. We were able to catalog more than 200 courses across the country, which signifies how there's a huge demand and also a huge interest in a lot of these courses and programs that are integrative. There's a huge interest from students, and there's a huge interest from the faculty in collaborating to make these courses happen on campus. And one of the things the committee did was commission a research paper that was written by Dr. Matthew Mayhew from the University of Indiana. And he was able to sort of categorize integrative courses into 3 different implementation styles. So they happen in the way integration happens in courses and programs across campuses is these 3 different buckets. So in-course integration, within curriculum integration, and co-curricular and extracurricular integration. So you have courses that deliberately infuse, aspects of arts, humanities into STEM and vice versa. You have, curriculum that will, for example, general education curriculum where you'll have you have to take 3 humanities, arts, or sciences courses that's built into the curriculum. But there are also, we acknowledge that there are also a lot of activities outside of the classroom, so like maker spaces, where a lot of this collaboration and integration is happening. And so we call that co-curricular and extracurricular integration. So these are how integration is happening. And so these are some further examples. As I mentioned, we, through questionnaires and surveys and testimonies that we collected throughout the 2-year deliberation of the committee, we collected 200 courses and programs, and they're online, and it's a living document, and we're continuing to build on these courses and programs. Some of the ones that I just pulled out from the course compendium to sort of describe what within curriculum and co-curricular courses might look like. Environmental ethics from ASU, and some of these others. I will highlight some of the studies that helped the committee come to consensus about the benefits of integrative curriculum and integrative courses. And one of these, a lot of the research that the committee found to be very rigorous was actually from the engineering field. One of them is right here. Can disciplinary integration promote students' lifelong learning attitudes and skills in project-based engineering courses? And that was a study that came out of Olin College of Engineering, where they looked at a material science class that integrated history and the history of science. And the authors were able to do a controlled study with cohorts of students that took the integrative course and students who didn't take the integrative course in material science. And they were able to find these educational outcomes: increased motivation and engagement in self-regulated learning, increased use of critical thinking skills, higher self-efficacy, higher value placed on learning tasks. So this is just one example of a study that we collected to come to consensus about this topic. I'm just going to go quickly. So the key learning outcomes that, these are some of the key learning outcomes that we were able to identify through the studies. And I have to preface this by saying the research is quite limited. But the research that we were able to collect and the research that was that the committee decided what met the rigor of their fields were some of these that are highlighted on the PowerPoint. So improved content mastery, improved ability to deconstruct complex concepts, creative thinking, increased motivation and engagement, improved communication skills, and improved team dynamics. The committee was actually also interested in what the career outcomes would look like for students who took integrative courses, but the research in that area is is not quite there yet. But we do know that these key learning outcomes are also skills that employers value. And let me stop there because this is probably going to be part of the conversation anyways, institutional barriers. And so I'll turn it to Laurie.
Great. And so thank you, Irene. Laurie Baefsky. I'm from right down the road, CU Denver. And I'm in the College of Arts and Media, and I have a really cool title. So I'm the Associate Dean for Research, Collaboration, and Innovation, or as I like to say, the Associate Dean for all cool things. And it's kind of interesting, as Irene said, I was part of this consensus committee, and I was brought onto the committee prior to moving to Denver. And most recently, I was executive director of a couple different organizations on the University of Michigan campus in Ann Arbor. One is the Alliance for the Arts and Research Universities, A2RU, which is a bunch of research universities really committed to this integrative model. And then the other program that I ran on the Michigan campus was called Arts Engine, Arts and Engineering. And there were 5 academic units that all piled on to this program that spanned across visual and performing arts, architecture, urban planning, engineering, and communications. And engineering was the driver behind this program, which really, 10 years ago, it was kind of at the vanguard. And now we're seeing lots of these integrative programs. As you will see in this compendium that Irene mentioned, there's over 200 programs that we've documented. So I will say, before I kind of toss the ball over to Frazier, this is going to be a conversation. And so get ready for your introduction as we kind of move around here. And I just want to say a couple things, kind of piling on to what you said. We looked at different kinds of integrative models, the in-class versus the co-curricular. And I remember when I was growing up, the co-curricular was called extracurricular, right? Raise your hand if you've heard that term. Mm-hmm. And they really shifted maybe 15 years ago to that co-curricular model because they actually did the numbers, right? And by the numbers, 20% of our time is in class, 80% of our time is not in class. And so when you're looking at the residential experience or any kind of educational experience, you're really looking at probably 4/5 of the time of that education happens not in the classroom. And so keep that in mind as we kind of have this conversation today. And then I guess I'll just say just two couple sentences about my own background. My background is actually in music. It's not in engineering. And I've spent probably 20 years running integrative or transdisciplinary programs. And I really came to it more as a way to hack the system, where, again, it was like, what is not being delivered, by our educational current models? And then really kind of driving policy and driving change civically, educationally, and personally. And so I'm involved in a couple different initiatives. One is around healthy communities. It's arts and public health, and looking at what are the aspects of a healthy community and bringing everybody together around those conversations. Another one is transforming communities through arts and humanities. It's called creative placemaking, where the arts and humanities are kind of integral to transforming communities, along with urban planners and architects and government entities. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Frazier.
Thank you, Laurie. I'm Frazier Benya. Like Irene, I work at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. I'm a senior program officer there. And like Irene, I have a interdisciplinary background, although what surprises most people is that not a single degree that I have is in the sciences, even though I work at the National Academy of Sciences. So my background is kind of a perfect example of an interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary education. My undergraduate was in Science, Technology, and Society from a liberal arts institution. I have a master's degree in bioethics that I did at the same time I was doing a PhD in history of science. And the two were related. And then I came to the National Academies, and I worked for the first 5 or 6 years at the National Academies in their Center for Engineering Ethics and Society. So there I, bridged from history into ethics, and did a lot of work around engineering ethics curriculum and sort of promising practices, and how do we get it so that it is an integral part of the engineering curriculum rather than something that gets outsourced. So that's kind of my background up until about 2 years ago, in which point I switched from doing engineering ethics activity and started a project at the National Academies that I was the director for, looking at the sexual harassment of women in science, engineering, and medicine. And if you're interested in that, I'll be talking about it tomorrow.
In this very room.
Yeah.
At 11:30.
11:30. And there'll be more food.
Thanks to our distinguished guests. So everyone, I think I know everyone almost in the room, but my name is Sarah Hitt. I'm the director of the McBride Honors Program here at Mines, which has been integrating the liberal arts with STEM fields for 40 years now. In fact, it was one of the first honors programs at a STEM university in the nation to have that explicit liberal arts focus. My background is not interdisciplinary, weirdly. I've all been literature, but exclusively all my teaching almost has been interdisciplinary, so it's kind of interesting, and really what turned me into a true believer is a class I taught for McBride several years ago with Kamini Singha on water in the West. And I will say that my side hustle is, while we all sort of are into like getting the liberal arts into STEM, my side hustle is getting STEM into the liberal arts, because I think this is an aspect, the humanists are all about saying like, yes, you engineers need us, but they're much less enthusiastic about wanting to integrate coding and math and lab science into their own work. So I'm trying to get it the other way around too.
And I am Dean Nieusma. I'm the Division Director of Engineering, Design, and Society. Not only Mines' newest academic department, but drawing on the strengths from McBride and honors broadly, I hope to be part of Mainz's most ambitious effort to do integration with the word engineering in the title, right? Because when you put that word in the title of your degree or your department or your program, the stakes around what counts as legitimate change dramatically. That challenge is part of why I'm here at Mainz. I came in August of last year. Before Mainz, I was at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute for 12 years, where I directed a program in design and innovation that was intellectually quite similar to the EDS mission and the EDS's Bachelor of Science in Engineering, General Engineering program. At Rensselaer, the intellectual goals were very similar, but the institutional placement was very different. So I mentioned part of the attraction of Mainz is doing integration from within engineering, or an engineering titled program. At Rensselaer, I was in a school of humanities, arts, and social sciences, where this design and innovation program that I directed was structured as a dual major. So we scaffolded all of the integration activities around the standing engineering degree structure. So the integration was systematic and intense, but organizationally external from the engineering units, and hence external from ABAT oversight. That creates tremendous opportunity. It also creates certain barriers that you can anticipate, most notably accounting for credit hours. There just isn't much room once you strip out the technical core. At Rensselaer, I was also, just before I left, appointed as Associate Dean for Curricular Transitions, still in the School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences. So most engineering curricula require some structure of humanities, arts, and social sciences coursework as part of ABET accreditation, usually. And at Rensselaer, that whole course structure, which was 24 credit hours, was redesigned to enhance, foster, facilitate better integration, better delivery, higher engagement, working against students' imagination that I take my humanities course as a break. I take my humanities courses at the end of my senior year when I'm already have my job offer and just want to push through them. So how do we, spend a lot of time with humanists, artists, and social scientists thinking, how do we rethink this programming from the ground up in a way that makes those connections to engineering students, while, of course, we don't have this problem at Mainz, while at the same time serving our own humanities, arts, and social sciences majors, right? That's a really difficult connection to draw. So with that, I hand it back to Laurie, who will set up the agenda.
Are you going to give the prompt, or?
Oh, what is our prompt?
Okay. I think
So
it's your idea.
We wanted to, it's a small group, and so we wanted to start by understanding where you all are coming from this. So we asked you to give very brief introduction, your name, what program or part of the school you're in, and then to make a brief statement about what you would like to amplify about the existing curriculum in terms of integration, or what you would like to change. Amplify or change in terms of integrating the humanities and arts into the Mainz curriculum.
So maybe we could start with Sandra and we can snake around.
All right, so I know most of y'all, but I'm Sandy Woodson, and I'm in. I'm not done. And I'm in humanities, arts, and social sciences, and I teach ethics and environmental philosophy, and I've been here since 1999, which is longer than many of my students have been alive, which blows my mind. And what I would like to see and or change is that, well, I don't think it is very integrative right now. Chen and I get asked to go give, here will you come teach them ethics on Wednesday, and then we'll be done with you, and it's usually towards the end of the semester. So there's a lot of kind of tacked onness that I would like to see change. I'd like to see it really integrated in classes and across the curriculum.
Hi, I'm Monica Kurtz, and I'm the Stakeholder Relations Manager with the EDS division. And, not as a member of the faculty, I'm here sort of mostly to observe and understand. My background is in mostly humanities and journalism and writing, so that's really been my background. So coming to an engineering school is something that's unique, but learning a lot.
Hello everybody, my name is Chinju. I'm Assistant Professor of Ethics and Engineering Education in Humanities, Arts and Social Sciences. So I'm very interested in integration. And one of the things I totally agree with Sandy was that at engineering school, sometimes we were invited to give ethics lectures. And sometimes we don't often think critically about the potential consequences of this approach. This can potentially generate danger in terms of disengaging all these integration efforts, because by doing so, you are creating an impression that ethics is complementary, if not supplementary, to engineering practice, and you are reinforcing this kind of like image among students. And they say, oh, we got like a guest lecturer talking about ethics, and the rest of the class will be talking about cybersecurity, and that's, and it's not relevant as long as you check all these boxes and you're done a good cybersecurity officer. So I want to know more about how to actually get engineering faculty be more involved.
My name is Lisa. I'm a PhD candidate in Renmin University of China. I'm a visiting scholar here. My advisor is Qin. Sorry. My research area is science, technology, and public policy. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
We do a lot of crazy but cool projects, such as comparing technocracy and Confucian ethics and modes and other Chinese philosophy approaches. And we're advocating for a weak version of technocracy. Yeah.
Scott Hausner, I'm faculty in the Division of Economics and Business, Daniel's faculty fellow in ethics and education. And every time I hear you say arts and humanities, I think arts, humanities, social science, business, all those things which need better integration into our curriculum.
All right, I'm Katie Johnson. I'm associate professor in electrical engineering. Part of my research is in social justice and socio-technical thinking within the engineering sciences. And I'm looking for ways to do better with my students, and also to help convince my colleagues. And having things like this, I'm gonna look up this table, showing them, oh look, they're gonna be more motivated, that kind of thing.
My name is Stephanie Clausen. I have a joint appointment between Dean's Division, Engineering Design Society, and Electrical Engineering. I'm a teaching professor, and I'm a part of a grant that Katie's leading right now about socio-technical integration in core engineering courses. So I'd like to think that we're at least endeavoring to do some of what we're talking about here. But one of the challenges, even if you have like willing faculty members to do this, is how that fits into the larger system of the university. Working with other engineering faculty within the department who may not support this, what does it count for in terms of the engineering degree or in terms of other degree requirements? How do you get rewarded for it, or at least not penalized for doing it? So I think there's a lot of systemic challenges there.
My name is Julia Ross. I'm also in the EDS division. I'm a new member of the humanitarian engineering team, So I have a lot of learning to do about what's working well at mines, what opportunities there are, what challenges there are. So I'm here to learn a lot.
I'm Joseph McKinsey. I'm an undergraduate student. I suppose if I could amplify or change anything, it would be that to make it easier for students to actually be able to take classes that they want. I think the greatest shortage is that there isn't really that many classes that students want to take, or they're in such short supply that the only people who can take them are people who are in their senior year last semester.
I'm
Rose Pass. I'm an associate teaching professor in humanities, arts, and social sciences. And I preach to my students the radical gospel that arts and science are not separate or competing fields of study, nor can they be separated in intellectual development or a sense of wholeness as a human being. And towards that end, again, my background is in literature and music, but I am so grateful for all I have learned about science and engineering since I've been here. That's a privilege. And so that's now being integrated in my course on Shakespeare and science. Which, this man was the star model student. But what happened? But anyway, this is a field, specifically Shakespeare and science, that suddenly is being developed in scholarship and research. And so I would not have thought of that course had I not thought. No. So anyway, my own mind has been expanded.
I'm Kelly Kneckle. I'm the Assistant Director for the Women in Science, Engineering, and Mathematics program. And I work very close with about 15 student leaders who are responsible for leading some sort of outreach or large-scale programming for campus on an annual basis, and sort of thinking about, as we approach those events and kind of just the goals, to build in more PAS learning outcomes.
Hi, my name is Benya. I'm a sophomore in the Petroleum Engineering program and Network program. I just thought it'd be interesting to listen to.
And I'm Stephanie Tompkins. I'm the Vice President for Research and Technology Transfer at the university. Obviously, my focus is much more on research, but clearly the integration of sort of the full range of humanities, arts, and social sciences with engineering, I think, tends to make us much richer and much more capable at solving actual problems rather than just publishing papers. And I did come from an institution that used to pride itself in focusing on disruptive and radically societally changing technologies, and they actually spent a lot of time thinking about, the impact of those and working with ethicists and social scientists to try to at least think about what that might mean. And it was a far from perfect process, but it kind of got me addicted to that slightly broader way of thinking. So I'm here to listen to work.
What was your institution?
It was called DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. So,
DARPA.
People love to talk about how DARPA, quote unquote, invented the internet, which they didn't. But, if they had, you can think about what it did, both for the good and the evil that has sort of arisen from it, right? So there's a lot of conversation used to say, because a lot of work right now is focused on even greater increase in the rapidity of genetic engineering tools that are out there, and there's a lot of questions that would say, is that the right thing to do? And the constant arguments of, well, everyone else is doing it, so we should too, and that so many things that just would keep you awake all night if you couldn't give yourself a framework for thinking about it. So anyway.
I just want to say, I think that's a great thing to talk more openly about, that an institution like DARPA spends time and effort and money talking about the social and ethical implications of the work that they're doing. Just reinforces to the engineering students that that is reality of what industry and federal government looks like.
I don't honestly know, we said it loudly and often, but I don't know if people really listened. The people who mostly listen to DARPA are the people who want funding from DARPA, so they're busily trying to figure out, checkbox.
Yeah.
Does this mean I have to do something in my proposal?
Yeah.
Oh, no, never mind. I don't have to worry about that, or politicians and Congress and things like that. So.
Right.
But that 1% of the people we told were actually listening.
That reminds me of what you were talking about, this morning in terms of modeling, where like if you model to a student that actually, yes, in the real world, engineers do integrate this stuff, and this is actually how, you know, it's not just a tack on at the end. I mean, so in a way, perhaps DARPA is like modeling to other, I don't know, grantees that's actually valuable. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
if there's a way we could get the institutions, the higher education institutions to hear that, though.
Yeah.
I mean, industry starts
Yeah.
to talk about that, and I think
Actually, so we, in my College of Arts and Media at CU Denver, we have one graduate program. It's primarily undergraduate new media. And that one graduate program is funded by DARPA, and it's our Center for Media Forensics in our Music Entertainment Industries program. And it's interesting. So when you think, what is media forensics? Why is DARPA funding this? And it's really, you know, it's that burn phone that ends up, you know, in the trash can. And then really you need musicians to decode, you know, is this, you know, really, you know, a cyber terrorist, or is this, you know, who is this? And we're actually training musicians in, you know, really, in computational science, you know, to decode things. So the burn phone is one of the things we do. And then, you know, like, let's say, you know, during all of the conflict in the Middle East, and we'd get these like YouTube videos, you know, and is this really in the, you know, in the Middle East, you know, in a camp, you know, where they're holding this person hostage, or is it a green screen? Right? And as we look at, and so it's that also that visual recognition that's happening. And so, you know, this kind of blending of arts and technology, you know, in this one particular thing I can speak to, and it's amazing. It's a really significant part of our offering now. I mean, it's kind of taken off, because I think it's the only media forensics program in, you know, one of the only ones in the United States, and it's DARPA funded. So I have a couple of things just to, you know, thank you so much for kind of being honest with your questions. One of the things I wanted to kind of circle back on is, you know, this idea of, you know, if it doesn't count, it doesn't count, you know, and it's true. So I was the one who was like, yeah, 80% of it is co-curricular, right? And so, and yet, you know, if it doesn't count, you know, ABET is so narrow in what we can even offer. And then it goes back to your question of, you know, there just aren't a lot of really interesting classes. So I guess just to kind of to be provocative, I'm going to throw it back at our student, our mathematics student, and say, you know, what kind of classes would you like to see? Like, what would be interesting?
More philosophy.
More philosophy. What kind of philosophy are you interested
I'm in ethics right now. And
Yeah.
We need, I say, we need philosophy of science. We need an epistemology class. It's crazy that we don't have it.
Yeah, it is a open class like that. I mean, I like something integrating both statistics and some sort of social science. Like, you see that all the time. You say anything, scholars, people using statistics to make an actual claim about human behavior or something like that, and usually there's not that many classes about that. I mean, a lot of times if there is like a class, a greater problem is that one professor teaches it, and that class will fill up within 30 seconds at 8 a.m.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Well, maybe
you guys could do some analysis
really
of frustration.
Yeah, that's how.
If we have register.
So there is a high demand for this class, this type of
problem.
I'm not sure, or it just fits in their schedule. I mean, I don't mean to be like.
And what does it count for? An elective or humanities
It's a
or?
restricted elective. That's part of their degree program.
Students need 2 300 Haas electives and 1 400 Haas elective.
Do you think that's enough?
I guess it depends on what you're taking. I mean, a lot of people can fill it up with like just a whole bunch of economics courses, and maybe they're missing on something else, like they can't take ethics, or maybe you can't take, I don't know, econometrics. I mean, econometrics is not even a restricted elective.
Econometrics? That's
your
cool.
Statistics class that answers.
Yes.
It's so cool.
But yeah. that's something common. I guess that's what I would like to see. There's also in-course integration. I think that'd be very nice. Like there, I think you mentioned that's example environmental ethics. I think we do have, but I don't believe we have like some classes that you might expect to be actually aren't part of that. Like don't count towards students at all. So glass blowing, like that's a class we offer. Like if you step out here and turn to the left, you can find some like glass blowing people have actually done, right? And that might be art, that might be humanities, but it's a free elective. Students will value it less. So just because it's like not, maybe it might teach them something they wouldn't want to know, but they can't afford it.
But they find such joy and pride, right, in that.
Yeah, then you remember it's like $1 per minute and...
You guys and your math. Yeah. Is it really $1 a minute?
I think it's something around there. I know it's expensive. It's very expensive.
I mean, I'm sure somebody here has figured it out. Like
For using the
glass blowing studio.
The studio? Wow.
Yeah, and also, it's like also time constraints. You have to take this classes and you have this much time, or I mean, you could take 18 credit hours, but you have to choose very wisely.
Scott, I want to connect it to integration specifically. So yes, there are a lot of things to learn, and yes, we have a lot of different interests, but what's your perception of students' desire for courses in humanities, arts, and social sciences, or outside of the technical core that deliberately, explicitly create the connections to their disciplinary focus areas, or math, science, tech, medicine, whatever, versus courses that actually are distinct from, that are like a genuine literature course, a genuine philosophy course, not just philosophy of science, but just intro to philosophy. Like, how do you think the student body as a whole, or how would it break out in your experience? Is that too much?
And June also is a student that we can get June's feedback too. She's hiding back there. Yeah.
She's a McBride. So she's had the Kool-Aid for sure.
If maybe it's too much, but I mean.
So I did some like informal survey with the students asking about 2 different approaches. And some students they say, well, I've been so tired of learning all these technical terms. I want something really special, like full, like true literature classes, nothing to do with technology.
Yeah.
And some students were saying like, I think I want something that is relevant to my specialty. Looks like you have students who are in both of the 2 different approaches.
And it's bifurcated. It's
my general assessment here on this campus at least is that, forgive my not rigorous statistics, is that more students will probably like the first approach. They like not so much connection with the technical concepts.
They like the break idea.
Break. Especially like humanities, arts, and social science classes. Like in the evening, get a break from the daytime.
Well, and I mean, so much. So I was sat on the consensus committee, and we had kind of expert after expert. And if you look in our book, which is online, by the way, it kind of lists all the experts. And one after another stood up and said it's in the gap where you have all these breakthroughs. So there's statistics around, like Nobel Prize winners, are 4 times more likely to do visual arts and 8 times more likely to do music, and it's something like 20 times more likely to do literature or poetry or something, and it's like, it's not necessarily scientific because it's not causality, but, it's like we've all heard anecdotally, that our brain needs to dream and to imagine. And, going back to kind of Shakespeare and science, I was reminded as you were talking about, like, at the very first page, this is like the first page. Does anybody know why we called the book Branches from the Same Tree? Anybody know where that reference comes from? Let me just read it to you. Albert Einstein once said, all religions, arts, and sciences are branches from the same tree. This holistic view of all human knowledge and inquiry is fundamentally connected, is reflected in the history of higher education. And it goes on from there. And the whole quote is much longer than that. But this interconnectedness of all knowledge is where we got the title, going all the way back to Shakespeare, who was an amazing philosopher and violinist and poet. And so I'll just throw that out.
I was just going to comment on the perception of students, and again, not statistical, but or anecdotal evidence, or anecdata, if you will. Anecdata. That you know Donna Riley, but I've heard from her and I've heard from other faculty members where they've tried to integrate into a very technical engineering course, thermodynamics, for instance, the ethical, social piece into it, and they get strong pushback from some students. Yes. And it's not just like, I just would prefer this not been here. No, they're like really upset that it's in there.
Right.
And I don't know that anyone's gotten to the root of what that is about, but it seems to me like that is something that has to be addressed in this question of how we're going to integrate this, because those students convey that feeling about this to other students.
Yes.
And it can sway how the whole class perceives this effort.
Yes.
So I don't know if anyone wants
it's
to
really
build
interesting
on
because in McBride, about a year from now, will be a class integrating thermodynamics and history of science. So that's being developed and attempted right now in the ethics of those kinds of discoveries, and in the personal lives of the scientists as well. But I think it goes one of the things that I think we battle against integration is a student's perception of how learning should happen, or how they're used to have learning happen, especially, and I've noticed the difference certainly in the 15 years of teaching plus, where it's like the students more recently with the rigorous testing in elementary, in secondary school, and these very specific subsets of knowledge, that has increased their resistance to anything being mashed up, right? Because we've drilled this into our very small children from the start, that now you do math, okay, now you do the, and then that's
so
how
it makes
we learn.
me think that basically, they've been taught a way to learn.
Yeah.
And now we're asking them to do something different, but without giving them perhaps the tools for how to do that. So they're starting at square one, and they feel a little bit like we're changing the game.
Exactly.
They feel probably really unsafe because they've bet everything on coming here.
Right.
Yeah.
So are there ways that we could make them feel safer in trying this new way of learning?
But so Donna Riley has a beautiful article on it, precisely this, called Power, period, Systems, period, Engineering, period. Brilliant title. And it's not just that students think this is how it has been done, this is how it ought to be done. This is how it's supposed to be done. It takes that half a step further.
Yeah.
So I think we're working against deeply embedded norms around education. Donna was very deliberate and thoughtful about how she created the scaffolding, how she created safe space. So it's not. So I agree with you. I mean, we absolutely have to think systemically, and we have to build the skills and scaffolding. Yes, but there's going to still be resistance, even if we do all of that, because some people, in principle, will seek to reject. And I think this connects to Katie's question around. Okay, we talked about this prior. Like, we're going to be preaching to the choir here. Like, how do we get to the skeptics?
And I think some of that is it's you get at it from two ways. So you get the students, but then they don't believe you.
Right.
And that's why you need the DARPA example, and you need the other examples from, if you look at the entertainment industry, it's ripe with arts and engineering being combined. So we need to make those more obvious to them.
Well, and also, so let me pipe in here. So one of our partners with A2RU, one of our founding partners was MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And it's really interesting because most of the students there are engineers. And there's been a real sea change. The engineers at MIT no longer want to go into industry. They all want to be entrepreneurs. So raise your hand. Oh, well, I think we have one student left. But the issue, so they've had to shift their curriculum into more of a playground situation where you can fail fast, fail forward, fail often, fail safely. And 90% of all startups fail, right? And then when you iterate on those failures, you don't iterate once or twice or 3 times, you literally iterate like 60 times. So this idea that the first idea is not the best idea, it's often the worst idea. And you have to. It's the same thing in writing. Like if those of you in literature, it's like the first draft is always the worst. And so it's around persistence and resilience, and really sticking to it instead of just going for the grade and going for that first kind of default solution. And somehow we need to shift what's acceptable. And part of that has to do with curriculum, right? Of allowing things to iterate within the curriculum and turn in something and then turn it in again and then turn it in again. And scaffolding.
You also have to confront this model that's not just in engineering but in medical schools where it's only the best to get to the end.
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, you can't fail.
Right. And with a grade obsessed culture, especially in these sort of more high pressure disciplines, I guess. Then there's no failure, right?
And I just wanted to add that in addition to this perception problem that students have, there's also, I think, the pressure of workforce demands and the idea that students have coming in, students and parents, their perceptions of what the purpose of higher education is. And I think there are polls that we cited in the report, data that says that I think most parents and students believe that the purpose of higher education is to get a job right off the bat, and so there is this. But go ahead. Yeah.
I think Frazier was talking about 2 approaches, like bottom up with students and top down with faculty. I think another dimension for me of 2 approaches is we have to learn to communicate in the language of the skeptics. We have to employ instrumentalist strategies. Students learn more, they learn better, they get good jobs. We have to employ that. But as humanists, it's our obligation and responsibility also to articulate a higher order vision of education. That we ought also to be demanding that education isn't just about getting jobs, it's about getting the right job, and it's about creating the right people for the jobs, and it's about creating people that understand themselves, and it's about creating citizens, and it's about much more than that first job and that first paycheck. And as humanist, I want to defend that vision of education while never denying or giving to others that we can't produce capable employees, career.
I wonder if this is partially a perception problem about the role of industry and what's expected. So research that we reference a lot in our work is this idea that engineers who have been in industry for a long time come to perceive this socio-technical work as the most interesting and engaging and stuff that they spend their time on. So we don't communicate that to our students. We lead them to think that once they go into industry, all they'll be doing is engineering. And then when they get to industry, they're disappointed that that's not what's happening. Right. Students come back all the time and I'm like, oh, how's your first job? And they're like, it's great, but I'm not really doing engineering. I'm like, your title is engineer. What are you not doing? And it's because they're not sitting there solving problems that we assign to them that they think this is not real engineering. And so I used to think that there was such a mismatch between what I was trying to do in the classroom and what industry was expecting. And now I wonder less if that mismatch is really there or if we're just failing to communicate the alignment that might actually be there.
Let me change the topic a little bit. So questions about National Science Foundation proposals. Right? So the two criteria to evaluate quality would be intellectual merit and also broad impacts. Right? Broad impacts sometimes you can be considered as an integration approach. Now, if you look at proposals in technical fields, normally faculty, I don't have my data, but some faculty may use the same broad impacts and make it adapted to many different proposals, right? And in fact, we don't really think carefully about potential consequences, right? I've seen people who, let's say, put in broad impacts, send students or send some of the graduate students to give talks to underrepresented populations or groups. and you can notice that these schools normally would receive like these outreach opportunities from different schools, from different departments, because they are underrepresented populations, right? So we don't really see whether these different efforts are aligned with each other and make a good experience for students. On the other hand, if let's assume that there's a panel discussion, let's say panel review, 10 proposals, right? If the 10 proposals, all their broad impacts are all low quality, so no one is doing a better job, so they will ignore probably the broad impacts and say, let's look at intellectual merit, which one is better. What about if a proposal that, intellectual merit might be a little bit lower, but intellectual impacts would be much higher quality? Would this make this outstanding proposal, or will this make reviewers, let's say, this proposal is less scientific, should go to an educational program?
Well, I mean, that kind of ties to the notion of like, those of us who are trying to do integration, is it more impactful but less rewarded, so you take the risk of having, you're not a true scholar in this area, but you're having this huge impact in the classroom, right? It's that same, I think, weighing of like what's worth more.
I mean, what I know of the National Science Foundation is they're desperate for creative measures around that broader impacts piece. And it's integrative, yes, and it's also like sometimes explicitly artistic. Where they're really looking for communicating science in really kind of citizen science terms. And that's where the artist and the humanist has a really critical place at the table. And the one example that just kind of sticks out is an artist scientist I know at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, who does both art and science. And over the years, she's gotten to know the program officers at the NSF. And part of what she does is at the end, she always has an exhibition that communicates the science, in really interesting ways. And she submitted a nice grant to the NSF in the last year, and they actually sent it back to her, and they said, where's the exhibition? Put another $50,000 in the budget so that you can, have that, because when it's done well, I mean, that's where, that is a huge part of the conversation. And I know that we're about out of time. I wanted to lob one more thing into the audience. And it really has to do about, I think our A students, are those check the boxers and, let's be sure we do, what does the test require? The B and the C students, they're kind of in ways looking at the curriculum in interesting ways beyond the binary. And I'm really interested in the D and the F students and how we fail them. And I think often, it's that we're not being creative. And it's not that somehow they're falling through the cracks, and we owe it to them. It's like, how are we adjusting the curriculum to address, kind of the marginalized students? And the one example I know of is a colleague who actually, there was a D student in his class, and he took every class that he taught. He was a sociologist, actually, and he slept through every class, and he took classes from this guy for like 4 years, right? And at the end of 4 years, it was like, I think it was going into his senior year, he finally took the guy out to lunch, and he's like, what do I have to do to keep you awake in my class? and the guy said, that he was basically doing video gaming all night, and he was developing video games, and he was a sociologist studying mythology, and it turned out the game that this kid was developing, he knew more about mythology than the instructor. And so he actually gamified the course, and he created a cohort of, that was very technological, that was very problem-based, that that had things that really spoke to the student and addressed the student needs. So I guess it would be maybe a question to what you're doing, in the honors college. How can we be creative with the curriculum to catch the D'ers and the F'ers? Because I really think it's our failure, not theirs, often. And maybe that's a rhetorical bomb at 5:04. So, or it can be any last comment, so they can just sit in the room. Yeah.
I saw the D and F'ers just stunned with our current exhibit in the library, the Da Vinci exhibit, at the fact that the same mind, the same creator, had produced the cam and flywheel engine, as well as The Last Supper. And they were stunned and fascinated and excited. So,
how do we bring that into the classroom? How does that translate?
Right, about what they found most powerful, share that with the rest of the class. And so I love that idea of contagion. And my job sort of reinforcing that and watering that seed and fertilizing that excitement. So anyway, my last word.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know folks had to catch.
Didn't realize it was 5 so